Hello, 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 beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the USL show where y'all, after a long, or kind of short season, it felt like this season has flown by, but also kind of drug on. It's the playoffs, baby. It is the playoffs. We have narrowed it down to, well, I guess about 2/3 of the league, so we barely narrowed it down. But we're here, dang it. And if you're not here, shame on you. Shame, shame, shame. We are going to be talking about all of the matchups, okay? Every single one of this opening round. And we are going to talk about your picks, the ones that if you filled out the Google form, and if you are people who listen to us and you do not follow us on Twitter, I don't know how you found us, to be honest, but thank you. Um, we're going to post the Google form in the description, and we will let you predict the matches, and we'll be posting those on Friday onto Twitter, Instagram, maybe, and possibly Reddit, whatever, about the fans voted playoff bracket. Because some of y'all have some hot takes, and it's not even we picked the underdog kind of thing. Like a majority of you have some hot takes, and we are getting so excited, so excited to jump in. Hello, people. And why are USL teams allergic to stadiums with roofs? Let me tell you something. That is something that has bugged me for a long time. I just want to quickly say this, especially teams that play in like subtropic areas, which is like pretty much all of League One and what, a fourth of the championship. Bro, it rains all the time. What are we doing? Why don't the just normal teams just have roofs? Like I understand most of them don't play in like they play in football stadiums, but also like get a roof. Anyway, that's a 2-minute monologue from me, and no one cares. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing well today, wearing my Scotland kit for their qualification into the next year's Euros. So pretty excited for that.
And down below, decked out in the SD, loyal to the soil, and apparently loyal to this podcast because after a long-awaited return, he is here. Alan.
Yeah, I almost forgot how to do this. No, it seems like every Tuesday night my job wants to schedule something that goes longer than it should. But I'm glad to be back. It's a great time to
Don't you work for a union?
I do, which is wild. Well, I mean, it's when all the educators can meet, right? So like I work during the day and then I'm like, all right, well, it's gonna meet. No, it's been really rewarding. The work has, so I can't be mad at it. But it's like I get home at like 7:15. I know some of the times I get home at 7, the show's halfway done because if Kaylor's hosting, they're going to 9:30.
Every time.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to be back. This is an exciting part of the year where, everything's ramped up to 11. Every game matters. It's, win or go home, or I guess advance on PKs or go home. So yeah, it's a fun time. This is when we get really good matchups. And I'm excited to see what happens in the playoffs because it's playoffs, baby.
Just a reminder for all the people who are ready to get your banter ready because your team didn't make the playoffs, but your rival team did. If they go through on penalties, they technically didn't win the game. So you can remind them that they didn't win a playoff game. It's the same way that FC Cincinnati never won a USL playoff game. And I don't believe – no, just saying – Bob Lilly, I think, has only won one playoff game at Pittsburgh. He's won a couple on penalties, but he's only won one. So I guess he's kind of washed. Not even that good of a coach, if we're being honest, or something. I don't know. Look, we have a lot of matches to talk about. So we put this Google form on Twitter and to our Discord. And if you want to fill it out, it's in the links in the description. And I am going to actually post it into our live chat in just one moment. If you want to fill this out and you want to have your say on the first round of predictions, here's what it's going to be. Here's where things are interesting. We have a couple of upsets. We have a couple of upsets that we think are going to happen. And I'm going to say upsets kind of loosely because 4 versus 5, I understand that home field advantage matters, but also 4 versus 5 is kind of, it's kind of a toss-up, right? But overwhelming upset that we're talking about here. 63% of the people who have filled out the Google form think that Louisville is going to beat Memphis. And I understand that Memphis did not play very well against a scorching hot New Mexico side. But are they really going to take that? Are they really going to take that the Lou City that just lost 3-1 to Tampa over that Memphis team? I think some people are voting with the name on the sheet and not with what they've seen this year, because this Lou City team at times has been rough.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been really convinced by a Louisville City team this season. I mean, they're top 5 in the conference, and they still have a negative goal differential. This has been the worst Louisville City team in their club's history. And you may look back through at the history of their playoffs, the 4 appearances in the USL final, or making at least the conference semifinal or the semifinals pretty much every year. They have that pedigree of success, but I just haven't seen it this season. And when you look at form of teams going into the playoffs, it's so crucial. When Louisville has lost 3 of their last 5 entering the postseason, including a 4-3 defeat to Miami, and also don't forget they also lost to that New Mexico team 2-0 as well. I think Memphis is in a better spot than Louisville, and especially when you enter this game playing at home.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, right? Like I'm not super convinced with Louisville or Memphis. I think someone in the comments wrote neither team deserved to win. I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but I think if I was picking between these teams, again, I'm just not convinced Lou City, although they have some veteran players who can put a team on their back and surprise some folks. So I wouldn't be like flabbergasted if Lou City won this one. But this has been a pretty tough year for Lou City. I mean, again, even by like normal Eastern Conference standards, not even Lou City standards, even just regular Eastern Conference standards, Lou City's not been the most convincing, right? 12 losses on the year, which is crazy insane for a team that is consistently one of the best teams in USL. So I think in my picks, I went with 901 only just because I thought, the home field is what's going to tip it over in favor of Memphis is just playing that home. I'm not sure Lou City's been great on the road.
Yeah, I think and if it isn't obvious by some of the analogies I'll make in this, I've been completely just engulfed with the baseball playoffs this last couple, I guess, weeks now. And Lou City is kind of the recent Houston, right? Where, okay, right now, as we speak, Houston are down 2-0 to the Rangers, but everybody kind of says, well, it's Houston. They've gone to 7 straight ALCSs. They seem inevitable, right? And I think a lot of people view Lou City like that, right? Where you see Louisville City and you see Memphis. You see a Memphis team who kind of hasn't done it the way that Lou City has. And even though this isn't a good Lou City team, at least not to their standards, I think a lot of people still fall back on they've been here. They've done that. And they've never missed an Eastern Conference final before. Never. And at some point, there are still players from that inaugural squad, and you have to say playoff experience does matter because those players really do know how to make themselves not last just 90 minutes, but in 120. They know how to go a full length extra time game without complete gassing themselves out because they have that kind of experience. But also that experience hasn't gotten them regular season wins. So I don't know.
I can't get over the 12 losses on the year as a team. I mean, you looked at the playoffs all last season. I know it was a different format, but none of the teams in the playoffs had 12 losses. You have to go all the way back to 2019 when Sacramento made the conference semifinals to find a team with at least 12 losses and made the playoffs to actually advance in that playoffs. And I can't get over how Louisville just has looked this entire season, that they just haven't convinced me really at any point. And I think it's going to be an ugly game this weekend. I don't think it's going to be a great watch of football, but I have to give the edge to Memphis.
To borrow your baseball analogy, Kaylor, can Lou City be last year's Philadelphia Phillies, who looked absolutely dead before the playoffs and then went on a brief little run, right? You're talking about Lou City. If there's any team that has a pedigree to go win three in a row just on a whim, like Lou City's one of those teams. But
I don't want to be mean here, but with that Phillies team last year, because this is turning into talking baseball. The Phillies team, we knew what they did. They could hit, and they had a couple of pitchers, and by God, they're doing that this year, where they're just banging the crap out of the ball. Maybe I am getting too reactionary. I could very well just be super reactionary, but what has Lou City really done well this year? What is the one thing that you can sit there and say this will carry them to the playoffs, right? Because we did it. We always come back to this Orange County example where they had Damas and he could score, and they had a defense they could rely on. They also have Ravelski, who was just stopping every penalty he's ever seen, right? They had something they could rely on. What does this Lou City team really have that they can rely on for an entire playoff run?
Yeah. I mean, they never strung together more than 3 wins in a row this season in the regular season.
Yeah, and their goal scoring has not been great either, right? Teams that have scored more goals, Miami, Tulsa, Hartford only has 1 less goal scored. And so I think that's, where they've really struggled. And so Memphis likes to score goals and buckets. They give them up. But I think Memphis, has the firepower to be able to go toe-to-toe with Lou City and get a couple goals. And the way Lou City's playing, that's going to be really hard for them to battle back. So that's why I'm picking Memphis.
So are we all taking Memphis? And Memphis, and it hurts me with every fiber of my being, is my lock. I am locking the area code in AutoZone Park, and I want to throw up. I want to go up to the next reverse upset, which this one's super close, which is Greenville versus Charlotte. And the people barely by 52% believe that Greenville are going to win this game versus Charlotte. Now, here's where we have to kind of talk about first half Greenville, second half Greenville. First half Greenville was not great. A lot of people were kind of questioning Harks, and I was one of them. I will put my hands up and admit. Then they started getting rolling, and they kind of turned into the Greenville team that we all kind of know and love. That said, they were dreadful at home. Absolutely dreadful at home. Fortunately for them, this is up the road. They're in Charlotte. Unfortunately for them, it might just end up being a pseudo home game anyway, depending on how Charlotte shows up. I mean, that sounds really mean, but that's real, right? That's close enough for Greenville to travel, and Charlotte hasn't shown up all year. They could, and I'll put my hands up and admit. But yeah, I don't know. I want to believe in what Greenville is doing defensively. I still love their spine. I think the spine of their team, from their midfield into their center backs, are top class. But you're also having to deal with the firepower that comes along with Charlotte. They can score goals and buckets. They don't care.
I think this is a really tough game to judge. I mean, when you look at a Charlotte Independence team this season, in their last 10 games of the regular season, they lost 2 of them, but those were 2 clearly better teams in Omaha and Northern Colorado. They come into the playoffs with tremendously good form, even though when they played Greenville this year, they lost both of twice to them this season. Then you have to go basically the entire year all the way back to April 19th to find the last time Charlotte did not score a single goal in a home match. It's been a consistent run of form, even if it hasn't been the most impressive run of form. But I think it's a really tough game to judge.
Yeah, Ryan, I think you're nailing this game as well, right on the head, right? That Greenville's been up and down. Charlotte's had some good run of form. And this is, a classic first round matchup where two teams are pretty equally matched. Only 1 point separate them in the standings. It's essentially the difference between losing a game and drawing a game. It's like their records are, it's not like one, drew a lot and the other, won more but lost more. They're pretty even teams. Maybe Greenville's experience in playoffs might come in handy here, but I think I went with Charlotte just because of the home game. But yeah, I think this is going to be a tough matchup, and it'll be a really fun one to watch because it will be. I don't think it's going to be a walkover in any direction. It's going to be a pretty hard-fought match.
You kind of talk about the experience part of this. I think you still have to point at you're not going to find much more experience than Dane freaking Kelly. When your leading striker is Dane Kelly, what more experience do you really want? Overton has been really good for them this year. Spielman has been the guy. It kind of got lost along the way, but Pack, their goalkeeper, until Sean Lewis just kind of showed up and, one Golden Glove, which again, 2 hands, you need both hands to catch it. It should be gloves. Pack was probably the best goalkeeper in the league. I understand Sean Lewis was really, really good, but what Pack did this year was ridiculous. I sort of struggle to see if Charlotte ends up scoring more than 2 goals. I sort of struggle to see Greenville scoring more than 2 against this back line. That's just me though. That said, this is like you mentioned, yeah, Greenville has this experience. Charlotte, I don't like bashing, attendance. I don't want this to become attendance pod FC, right? Because there's so many reasons. For example, people are bashing Loudon for their awful attendance, but they grew like crazy. And you know what? We should be happy that Loudon is no longer, a 2 team, but they're trying to be independent and do their own thing. But, instead we have, Charlotte who are doing whatever they're doing, and it's just beyond disappointing to the point that Greenville is probably going to have more fans there, and the Greenville is probably going to be the ones bringing the juice. So can you really even point to the home match? In fact, imagine being the away team and knowing that you have more fans. You just experienced this, Alan, when you go to an away game and the away fans are bringing more juice than the home fans. There's something empowering about that, not just as a fan, but also as a player.
There is something to be said about the vibe of the stadium and the energy that supporters bring or lack of supporters bring. But as Andy can probably attest to, like being few but proud, like you're still bringing the heat, and your team can still do some damage at home or on the road. With like Orange County, wouldn't necessarily, people were making fun of them for years for having not many fans, but they have a star above their crest. So like it matters to a point, right? It can lift a team, but I think, just having a strong support from a small number of people does still make a difference, right? Because those players still have something to play for. But you're right. Like, I think there are some guys that can do some damage for Charlotte, and I think higher scoring game, I would tip it for the home team. But yeah, it should be a fun one. I'm not surprised people are going with Greenville. It's a sexy pick. It's Gio is a handsome, fantastic human being, so I'm sure that's part of it as well. The hair, yeah. So yeah, this will be a really fun one to watch. If you haven't watched USL League One game yet this year, this might be the one to hop into. Although the other matchup is not a bad shout either.
No, and I want to quickly just go ahead and jump in on this one. Northern Colorado versus Madison. Madison loses to their self-proclaimed biggest rival, which feels a little gross with what they have with Richmond, but I don't know. That's not for me to decide. They lose 1-0, and they're kind of relying on others, and they get in for, I guess, the first time they get a playoff game. You finally more wins than Kits, I guess. I don't know. And they get in after just backdooring, basically, just an absolute skid into the playoffs. And you're going against Northern Colorado that has the top assister in league history. You had the top goal scorer in league history in a single season, not all time. It's short. It hasn't been around that long. Not biggest achievement, but still. It feels like a team that started off with a fantastic back line in Forward Madison has kind of crumbled away. Meanwhile, Northern Colorado has recaptured the magic, which is simply letting Arthur Rogers play out wide and stop sticking him as center back. Suddenly, it all comes back. So, what do we make of this?
I think form is so crucial with entering the playoffs. I said it again with Louisville, but you look at a Forward Madison team who are entering the playoffs winless in their last 5. In fact, you have to go all the way back to June 10th to find their last victory against a team who made the playoffs this season, which that's kind of really hard to get over. Then when you turn around at a Northern Colorado team who were basically a win away from winning the Shield for USL 1, that they traded it with North Carolina, with Union Omaha all season. I don't see how you can overlook that Northern Colorado team from this entire year. And just for an anecdotal evidence, Tormenta was the 3 seed last year and won the league. And you look at Northern Colorado also as the 3 seed, so it can be done. And honestly, you could say Hailstorm was more equipped to win the league than Tormenta was entering the playoffs last season.
Yeah, this is a team that I think a lot of people thought would win the USL League One early in the season, right? Really stifling defense, really exciting attack. Like, they were really fun to watch. And then they hit a rough patch, right? Like, you go through those in the season. Form really dipped. There was some concern. But they really turned it on back at the end. And I do think they're, kind of a sexy pick to make it through. Getting the bye would have been helpful. I think that's kind of one of John's points in his tweet is, it might come down to Northern Colorado not getting the bye is what might keep them from, crossing the line with the cup. But, any of those 3 teams, I think you can comfortably say were pretty much the dominant teams of the league, and probably all 3 of them deserve to lift the silverware at the end of the year. Union Omaha coming through again, probably surprising some folks, ending up at the top, probably at the beginning. But I think you can say the same thing for Northern Colorado, and they've been a really fun team to watch, and they've been some of my picks and locks throughout the season because of it. So I think based on form, based on how they play, it's nice that Forward Madison had a successful year, and congratulations to them. But I just don't think they have enough to get through. If they pull a David versus Goliath, a cup set, if you will, I'm not sure how much further they're making it. But congratulations to them on a successful year and starting to maybe build something for the future of Forward Madison. But, Northern Colorado is really a darling pick.
I mean, we just saw this matchup, right, where we just saw Northern Colorado take on Forward Madison. And it's one of those where you talk about it, and we did talk about this one, I think, on the show, where if you're Forward Madison, you feel very hard done by because Northern Colorado had 2 shots on goal and they scored both of them. Meanwhile, you only had 1 shot on goal and you didn't score. And you can say, well, you didn't create enough. You only had 1 shot on target. And they can say they had 2 shots on target and they scored with both. What were we supposed to do? Right. And I think that is a thing. But I also just look at this Northern Colorado team where they've only lost 2 matches in really the last, I think, 10 games. And one of those being to Union Omaha while they were as high as a team could ever be. And the other one was, they just lost somewhat recently to North Carolina. 2 teams that it's kind of okay to lose to, right? I think that it wouldn't shock me if Ford Madison won because they have some players. I mean, Christian Chaney is a big-time player. He just is. It feels like every time that the spotlight is put on, Madison, Wisconsin, Chaney's doing something that's really cool and really fun. You have explosive wingback play out of like Stephen Payne, who has been an unsung hero for this team this year, who can really take advantage of these overlaps if need be. That said, I think I'm still taking Northern Colorado because Arthur Rogers was playing CDM and right back in their most recent game. And if they want, they can put him at right wing if they want. It doesn't matter. And guys like that and Amon can score goals for fun if he gets just a little bit of service. It doesn't even have to be good service. We've seen it. He'll just get the ball at his feet and creates magic. And with as shoddy as this Ford Madison backline has been in, the last 10 or so games, I just don't see a path for them. So, I do see a path, but I don't think it's realistic.
Yeah, I said it like a few weeks ago. I think it's a very likely chance that the winner of League One comes from one of Omaha, North Carolina, or Northern Colorado. And I think with Northern Colorado winning this one, you set up an incredibly sexy tie between them and North Carolina in the next round. And I would even go as far as to say if it's that tie in the next round, the winner of that game wins the league.
I can get behind that. Now let's go back over to the championship. And there's a couple of matches that are kind of close in voting. And there's a couple that kind of shocked me. One of those being we have 35% of the vote saying that El Paso will beat Orange County. Which
it's still on his burner accounts, by the way.
Yeah. It's actually all of Seriously Loco. They're just constantly signing in. It's still 35% for this. It's kind of a big deal, especially when you think about a 2 versus 7, right? That's a big number. And I think there's a little bit of merit here. El Paso won the season series. You could also say, well, Orange County wasn't very good, and this was kind of when, El Paso was kind of, they were kind of doing their thing. You can kind of say that. But also, we saw it later, and, Orange County didn't get the win. So there is precedent here, and we just saw El Paso get a really good win against Oakland, which, by the way, that's a win and get in situation. They've already played a playoff game, essentially, for both those teams. So it's not like they just beat some garbage team. It's not like they went up to, Hartford, and got this, 2-1, 2-0 win. They did it against Oakland, who has been pretty dang good all year long. Meanwhile, you have Orange County, who fired their coach. Tell me if you've seen this script before. They were really bad. They fired their coach. They went on this hot run, and they are blazing hot coming into the playoffs. I don't know if you've heard this one before. Stop me if you have. I don't know. I feel like it's hard to pick it against Orange County, but there's obviously still a path for victory here.
I think it really depends on which El Paso team shows up. You talk about the season series, but the aggregate score of that was Locomotive only winning it 1-0 across 2 games, which, yeah, they won the series, but that's not the most impressive result of the two. And it's almost an exact opposite of what you see. You saw an El Paso team get hot to start the year and then go on a long winless run that we're honestly kind of shocked that they even made the playoffs anyways. And then you see an Orange County team who, through the second half of the season, only lost 3 games all year, comparing that to El Paso, who only lost 3 games in the second half of the year, comparing that to El Paso, who only won 4 games in the second half of the year. I think just looking at that, it's really hard to pick against Orange County right now.
Yeah, and those two of those losses were against a really hot Switchbacks team down the stretch, and then away to San Antonio. But Orange County ended up beating San Antonio. They beat Sacramento. I think, Orange County, Milanowski can put that team on his back at any moment and score amazing goals. I think he's a huge difference maker. I think Shuttler's been really nice in goal as well. The last couple games, yeah, sure, 3-1, but not a ton of scoring for Orange County outside of Las Vegas down the stretch. Some 1-0 victories, which, are reminiscent of that earlier season. But yeah, one heck of a run from Orange County. And so I find it really hard to pick against them at this point. And so I ended up going with Orange County as my lock this week, because I do think, Orange County in the playoffs have been good. Maybe not the best road team. And El Paso does have a pretty good away record, although their goal differential is not great. So this is an interesting matchup. And I do think, the people who are picking El Paso, there are very real reasons why El Paso could very well win or at least survive this match. But Orange County, I think they take care of business here. They step it up one more notch, and they ride the high of finishing second after being like 42nd place in the West at one point in the season. And it's just been incredible to see their run up the standings.
I think the biggest thing for El Paso, right, is I think I said this preseason, and I think it's kind of stayed true. I trust their defense a lot, actually. I really like their back three that they've been rolling out with. I mean, a guy that they just got in Dollenmayer, which, by the way, his headed goal, clutch. I mean, really nice headed goal for a first-ever professional goal is nice. But Dollenmayer, and then you have McHugh, and then you have Mark Navarro, who, those are 3 studs of center backs, right? But the big question for me was, where was the scoring going to come from? This was the issue preseason. It's the issue now, where they have players who can score if they can even get a shot off. I mean, Phil talked about it, and this is where we were kind of heartbroken you weren't with us, Ryan, last week, because we were trying to figure out how long it had been since El Paso had even put a shot on target, because they went over 2 games. They went longer than 2 games of putting a shot on target. And that you can't do that. Not against this Orange County team, too, where if you're not creating anything, I mean, you can only put your center backs up against Milanowski so many times before they break. And you can say, well, our defense wouldn't do that. Milanowski's different. He is going to break you down. There's a reason why he's gotten the big European move, right? Don't forget that's still happening. It's not like he's leaving in January. So I find it hard to see El Paso winning, but if they can get shots off, I do think there's a world. I don't think it's impossible, because this El Paso team, when they were running hot, I mean, they were the best team in the USL. And that wasn't so long ago that they couldn't recapture some magic, but it feels like that magic is completely gone.
I mean, you saw El Paso win 7 in a row. Orange County won 8 in a row this year when they outscored opponents 21-6 in that time. And that included a victory over our Shield winners, Pittsburgh Riverhounds, in that time. I think you're looking at an Orange County team who could have an argument to be made is one of the hottest teams entering the Western Conference playoffs.
Yeah. So who are we all taking on this one?
OC.
Let's see.
Yeah, I locked OC.
And I am also taking OC. Let's go ahead, and I want to just hit a couple of quick fire bangers just to talk about them. I want to talk about first the USL tactics for this week. Sacramento versus New Mexico. Now, over 10% of you say that New Mexico can win. And Nicholas Murray, #ad, we're not paid, on the Rondo said that New Mexico is one of the dark horses that you should pay attention to. And we're going to go ahead and let John tell you why.
New Mexico United is on a roll, and on the back of a 4-1 press, they beat Memphis this past Friday to get into the postseason and really solidify themselves as something of a dark horse. You can see the way across that game that the fluidity and aggression of their midfield forced Memphis into really tough scenarios. This play starts with Zico Bailey, a central midfielder, closing higher than any other striker on the team, but he gets support from Harry Swartz on the wing, and the responses behind him from player to player are absolutely perfect to make sure that New Mexico is finding the ball and getting solidly into the final third. You're going to see Bailey close down high again, stepping up from that central spot to really play aggressively against the opposing defender, and it nearly ends up in an interception that puts New Mexico on attack. They're constantly closing teams down hard, constantly getting into good positions by winning the ball back in dangerous areas. Now, that same fluidity and that same aggression, especially from the central midfielders, applies when New Mexico have the ball at their feet as well. Here you see Amando Moreno tuck inside from the left wing, but look who's getting in behind. Sergio Rivas and Bailey especially are making runs like they're forwards. Bailey scores because of it there. When New Mexico took a lead, they were able to sit back, really in a flatter 4-5-1 sort of look. Here you see Moreno and Rivas getting back, pretending like they're defenders, essentially, to close down the game. Now, late on in this one, Memphis moved to a back three to try to stave off the press, so New Mexico adjusted wisely. They moved into more of a pure 4-3-3, but they upped the way that their wingers were making runs inside, taking advantage of the channels between those center backs, and you see it perfectly here. Greg Hurst made some runs like a pure striker, in changing up his approach from when he tended to sit back behind those advancing center mids early in the game. And it really ended up putting New Mexico on the front foot to take 3 points and continue their momentum as the playoffs approach.
And so with that, New Mexico is hot. They are hot right now. And a lot of that comes down to Zico Bailey, which John, really well broke down. Zico Bailey comes over from San Antonio, and you think, hey, this guy is just going to be a bombing, basically winger who sometimes defends, but they're playing him as a central midfielder. And he looks really good. A guy that I really didn't get a lot of love in this tactics show, shame on you, John, is Portillo. Portillo has been really good this year. And in this hot run, he's been massive catalyst for this team, right? I mean, Portillo is in the center of, the center of everything, but he is connecting the play to everyone. The ball goes to the middle, it goes to Portillo. The ball goes to Portillo, it goes out wide. He is what's creating so much movement for this team. And as David mentions in the chat, yes, Memphis are predictable on the wings when being pressed. I think that's a really good point. They've also done this against Phoenix. They also did this against Lou City. They gave a real fight to Pittsburgh. They've done it against real teams, and it's looked like this. New Mexico is scary coming into this, but as I like to remind you, they are going into the den of the indomitable. where Sacramento does not lose at home.
It's interesting when you look at both of these teams, Sacramento and New Mexico. They have an identical record in their previous 5 games. But if you just look at the 3 wins that Sacramento put together here, I mean, it's up against Las Vegas, RGV, and Miami, 3 teams who missed the playoffs, whereas you're looking at Memphis, Phoenix, and Louisville City from New Mexico, 3 teams who made the playoffs. But yeah, it's really tough to get over Sacramento. Just they don't lose at home. They've lost only twice there all season, and it's just that challenge to go into this venue and to try and walk away with 3 points. It was only Orange County and Monterey Bay who were able to do it all year. I think the one thing New Mexico would have going for them, and Alan's going to dislike me for this, is I feel like they're on a run that Oakland was on, similarly to end last season, and they were able to go into a higher seeded opponent or to a better seeded opponent in San Diego and walk away with a tremendous victory on their behalf. If you catch Sacramento sleepwalking into the playoffs, I feel like that's the perfect scenario for New Mexico to come in and get a result. I just think Sacramento is very well prepared, well drilled. Them alongside San Antonio have the best goal differential in the Western Conference right now. I still think Republic's going to win.
Yeah, I think that Oakland-San Diego matchup is pretty on point with explaining this one. I think if New Mexico was playing literally any other team, I think it would be a really strong pick for them to get something out of it. But Sacramento, you talked about your goal differential. They allowed 9 goals at home this season in 17 games. 9. New Mexico is the second worst team in the West on the road. They've only won 4. So I just have a hard time, if this game is played 100 times, New Mexico might win a couple. So it's not out of, the realm of possibility. But I think Sacramento at home is just a tough place to play. It's like Pittsburgh this year. You mentioned 2 losses, but only 4 draws, right? 11 wins out of 17. I would just have to. You just got to go with your gut here and say that Sacramento is more than likely to pull this off. And although it hurts my heart for you to bring it up, Ryan, at least San Diego won't get eliminated by Oakland this year. So there's some hope there. But yeah, New Mexico, good season. I think really turned it around to find themselves in a playoff spot. But I think they got kind of a bummer matchup. I think if they ended 2-7, I think you can make a good case that, New Mexico could probably get something out of Orange County. San Diego and New Mexico have never beaten each other, so that would have been another probably favorable matchup for New Mexico. But I think pulling Sacramento is a really tough one for them.
I am going to say Sacramento, and there is one player that I talk about a lot. And if I had an MVP vote, what's up, Nicholas? What about it? I'm here, babes. If I had an MVP vote, honestly, I'm giving it to Jack Gurr. Jack Gurr, their right back, has been incredible this year. And if you're looking at this left-handed side that Jack Gurr will be going at, and you're looking at Suggs for New Mexico, who has been fine. He's been good this year, but kind of a different caliber, right? Kind of just a different caliber of player. Suggs is good. I mean, Moreno, as mentioned, he's been dropping back and helping out a lot, but it's not just Jack Gurr you're worrying about. You're worried about the rest of the team, right? I think that they have an ability to overload the wings better than just almost any team in the league. And Russell Cicerone up top, just float it to him and see what happens. Magic will ensue. I think Sacramento win this, but it's also one where I'm not shocked that they would win this. This is, in fact, I want to segue this into the other one. I think this is the most competitive looking 1 versus bottom seed we've had in a long time, because we're looking at Pittsburgh versus Detroit City. And you say, well, Detroit City literally had to rely on said Russell Cicerone in order to get into the playoffs. Do they even deserve to be here? But if you're anybody who's watched Detroit City this year, I mean, they can draw with the best of them. They can get you your 1-0 loss. They can get you a 0-0 draw. They can get you a 1-0 win. And the playoffs, and let's be honest, if it's 0-0 going into extra time, I mean, hunker down, let's figure it out. I think there's a real path to victory for Detroit City, which is let Nate Steinwasser stand on his head, let that back line do their work, and maybe pray for a miracle, or better, pray for PKs. I think that's a real strategy. Do I think it'll win them a U.S. Cup or like a USL Cup? No. I don't think you can go through the whole playoffs doing that. But for one game where you're going into an insane environment in Pittsburgh, which I think is already sold out, I think they have the basis to go out there and steal a win.
I think you just cannot overlook Highmark Stadium this season. Pittsburgh has lost one game at home all year. It's now honestly a masterclass from Bob Lilly this entire season. They've only had 2 games at home where they've been shut out, and that was Louisville and Sacramento coming into town to do so. Oh, and those were 0-0 results. You're looking at what Pittsburgh has done this entire season, and it's been a tremendous run of form that I would say arguably this team rivals what Bob Lilly's Rochester Rhinos of 2015 did as well. Maybe not in the same record, since that Rhinos team had just 1 defeat, but this is the Pittsburgh River Talent team is my overwhelming ELO ratings best team in the league right now. And I think regardless of what happened in these two teams' most recent fixture against each other, of it being 0-0 like Keyworth, I just can't pick against the Riverhounds in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to bring my West Coast bias in here a little bit and say, like, the 2 games that really influenced the OC San Diego being where they are in the standings is the 3-1 Orange County defeat of San Diego, which was a really well-played game for Orange County, and the fact that Orange County got Pittsburgh at home and San Diego had to play Pittsburgh on the road. And that's a huge difference, right? You see the difference in results, and playing Pittsburgh at, the Room Stadium is, a tough place to go. So I do think, all of the things that we said about New Mexico, Pittsburgh, or New Mexico, Sacramento, I think you ditto that with Pittsburgh, except DC is not nearly as good as New Mexico is right now. Yeah, they could probably pull something out because you have a really good goalkeeper. But I think Pittsburgh is letting in less than 1 goal per game at home, and Detroit is scoring less than 1 goal a game on the road. So, like, statistically, they'll have less than 1 goal. So if Pittsburgh scores 1, that might be all they need to get past Detroit City. If Detroit City's going to keep a clean sheet in order to get to PKs. That's a tall task. You got a guy with 20 goals in his bag. So all they need is 1. It's that similar story to Orange County, where I think they need, sometimes all you need is 1 from Milanowski and you're good to go. So with Pittsburgh, yeah, they don't have a ton of other goal scorers, but Dikwa, all he needs to do is put 1 in, and that might be enough to get by Detroit City.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think this is same situation as we had last year with Memphis versus Detroit City, where I made the very astute observation that after Memphis scored the first goal, Detroit City lost. And it was like, yeah, obviously they were losing, right? Of course, a team that starts losing, that's the reason they lost. But Detroit City didn't have the firepower last year to really claw 1 back like that. And I still think that's the case. But I think that your path to victory is Nate Steinwasser stands on his head, Amu Mensah, Michael Bryant, Carroll are all just standing on their head and defending like their lives depend on it. They've done it all year long. This is not a new ask for them. I'm not saying it's likely. It's not. It's not likely at all. But I think everybody can envision what Detroit City walking out of Highmark with the win looks like. It's somehow they managed to squeeze one goal and their back line stands on their head, or they take it all the way to PKs. I think that path to victory is real. Is it likely? No, but it's real.
Looking back at the number one seed's first game the number one seed of the Eastern Conference, their first game of the playoffs, they've never lost any of it. The closest I think it ever came was FC Cincinnati in 2018 when they won on penalties against Nashville. And the last time you saw a Pittsburgh Riverhounds team as the number one seed of the Eastern Conference playoffs, they scored 7 past Birmingham, which is that's just kind of that's the history of what the number one seed in the Eastern Conference has been capable of doing. And more often than not, that number one seed makes the conference finals at a minimum. I think right. Detroit's in for a very tall task. And I think if Pittsburgh can get the first goal, it's going to be game over from there.
Yeah, completely agreed. Let's go ahead and move over. I'm trying to see the ones we have not discussed. I want to quickly hit on San Diego Phoenix. And by the way, this isn't obviously going to be a longer episode for people who are listening and you're seeing the bar later. This is the longest round of playoffs, right? Because we're doing all the games for all the playoffs, but we're going to try to roll fast. San Diego versus Phoenix. San Diego, by the way, just to let y'all know, less than 25% of people think that Phoenix are going to win this game. And I don't know how much of that is tactics. I don't know how much of that is people watched Phoenix this year and said, this is the way that this is going to go because they watched San Diego, they watched Phoenix this year. And how much of it is this is a home game for San Diego, and every single home game could be the last one, and everyone knows that. I think a lot of people want to buy into the story. Oh, and it helps that they're a good team along the way as well. That said, oh my God, like Phoenix has the best front three. I think Phoenix has the best front three in the USL. They're disgusting. They're so good. And I think that this San Diego Phoenix game very well could be the match of the playoffs. I think this could be the most exciting one because these teams don't like each other. We've seen it every single time. They don't like each other. The fans don't like each other. I mean, what fans do like Phoenix? Am I right? Let's get that one out there. But I don't know. This is a weird one to predict because I think there's predicting with the brain, there's predicting with the heart. And I don't know if that's where the skewed numbers come into play.
Yeah, I think the overwhelming response was like, of course it's Phoenix, right? Like, if it's not going to be Orange County, it's definitely going to be Phoenix, right? Like, it's part of – I said on Two Balls this week that I don't think there's another team that is entwined with Loyal's story more than Phoenix is. Orange County definitely has its moments, but this is tough to predict because they haven't played each other since like week 3 of the season, it feels like. And they're two completely different teams, right? Phoenix has rediscovered who they are. They went on a pretty good run, beating some pretty good teams like Sacramento, scored a ton of goals against Detroit City, but have also tripped up and drew against Locomotive and lost, the last 2 games against New Mexico and Colorado. So I think, if you want to talk about kind of of course it's this matchup because it's part of that story, right? It's this emotional end. I think San Diego fans would loathe the team being buried by Phoenix. But I think I don't think you can find a better matchup for the storyline than Phoenix San Diego. And I do think it's going to be a fun match. It's going to be teams with 2 good goalkeepers that can make some really good saves. You got attacking players that are, kind of running in form, right? Damas had scored 5 goals in 2 games. The last 2 home matches, he has 5 goals in them. Toomey scored. Perez is really coming on, and Blake Bodley has set the team record for assists. So I think this is going to be a really fun old school Western Conference matchup where, defenders are there, but I think the offensive team is really the story here is who's going to outscore each other. And I'm nervously optimistic about this one because it will be a really good environment. I think tickets are flying out. I know Phoenix travels really well. It's a Sunday night game, so you won't be in the warmth. It'll be a nice, cool night with a wet pitch, and that's just going to aid in the offensive firepower that we're going to get from this game. So should be a really fun one. Should be lots of ups and downs, lots of really good attacking moments, and I have my personal bias on who I think is going to come out victorious. And I think if you want to talk about a crazy storyline, if it goes chalk, then San Diego has to go to Orange County. And so it's like you don't want to look past Phoenix, but what another great storyline of having, you're basically playing your 2 biggest quote rivals if you can make it past Phoenix. But Phoenix wants to come into San Diego and beat them up. So it should be fun.
Phoenix is the only team out of the 16 in the playoffs right now who don't have a win in the last 5 games. You compare that to San Diego, who entering the playoffs one of 2 teams in the league who are, one of 3 teams in the league who are unbeaten in their last 5 games. You look at the San Diego team who outscored their opponents 13-4 in that time. And when you just add in everything else that's surrounding the team from the just latter half of the season into the playoffs, the fact that this could be the last San Diego Loyal home game, even if they win, and I think it just adds so much to it that I have to back San Diego Loyal as having not just the on-field advantage, just the off-field story is just so much more intriguing and better than a Phoenix team who could very well be in this position again next season of just being the same competitive team that makes the playoffs. But San Diego to win.
I'm also taking San Diego, but I honestly, if this one ends up like 3-3 or 4-4 going into PKs, I'm not shocked, at all. This has the potential to be one of the best playoff games you've ever watched. And I don't mean that lightly. These teams love to score goals for fun. And as much as we love watching Koke Vegas be a literal midfielder, as much as we love that, it also does leave them, able to be counterattacked, which Danny Trejo still exists. Armanaka still exists. Arteaga still exists, right? Formella still exists. These are really good players that I think once the first goal goes in, it's about to become a goal fest, and I am so excited to watch it. I'm taking San Diego because of home field, but if this was in Phoenix, I think I'd go the other way. I think it's going to be that kind of game. I want to go over to the low country that is Charleston down to Patriots Point, where 32% of you think that Indy are going to come out with a win, where a singular 4-0 win really skews the season series into Indy's favor. The other one was a draw. This is a Charleston team who kind of sputtered after Ben Pierman talked to us, if we're being honest. But ends up breaking the single season turnaround where Charleston gets a 34-point swing, which is they got 34 more points than they did last year. They only got 25 last year. If they got 34 points this year, that's an improvement on a season. They got 34 more points, which is ridiculous. And Indy is another team that has really turned it around. They got hot, then they kind of got not, and I think they've kind of come back down to earth a little bit. But going into Patriots Point when it's rocking is one of the best atmospheres that you can find in the USL. to the point that they had to add stands this year. They had to add seating for all the Charleston fans that were showing up. If they get that, it's hard to see Indy coming out of it, but also all these players have been there, done that in the hardest, roughest, and toughest environments. I mean, this is the 2018 All-Stars, by God. They've been there. They've done it. If there's any team that can do it, it is going to be this Lowry side, right?
I think what's so interesting with Indy 11, if I'm reading this correctly, is they're unbeaten against Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay, and Charleston this season in the league, but then they've picked up losses against both Memphis and Louisville. It's just incredibly fascinating of a matchup when you're looking at both of these two teams kind of going into it. If you look at the final 12 games of the year for Indy 11, they only lost twice, and that included a very stellar end to the end of the season. We'll talk about San Antonio here in a moment, but a 3-3 draw against the defending champions of the league. I think Indy 11's entering this game with a little bit of momentum on their side that I would actually pick Indy 11 on in that, 10% that picked them to get an upset here.
32.
Yeah, I mean, Indy 11, second best team on the road in the East. Just 1 point off the best, which was Charleston. Same record as Tampa Bay. So, like, you're talking about a really good road team in Indy 11, at least road record. Kaylor, you did mention the 2018 All-Stars. I think there is something to be said about some of that stuff. But I went with Charleston because of, they're a really strong home team. We're not talking about Pittsburgh. We're not talking about, Sacramento, but a really good home team that is going to have a lot of energy to be able to go to stay at home and to do well. And I may be a little bit low on Indy. Part of me has like a little bit of hope for them, right? Two of my favorite USL players, and Jack Blake and Aiden Quinn, are both on that team. So there's a little bit of love there. But like I said, I wouldn't be. I think this is probably, if I had to pick an upset, this is probably the one I would choose like the most confidently. But I went with Charleston.
Yeah, I think I'm taking Charleston here too, but I'm not shocked if Indy walk out. That said, I think I'm more shocked about Indy walking out of here with a win than I think other matchups, though. But it just feels like Charleston, they finally got their win, by the way, and it was a pretty decisive win at that against Birmingham Legion this last week, where it didn't look like they really had a chance, right? And I think that Charleston finally kind of got the monkey off their back and said, okay, we're good. We got the win going into the playoffs. We're fine. And because there's a little bit of complacency like Charleston didn't have to win. They couldn't go up or down. They were just kind of there. And I think they've been kind of stuck there for a while. Now they have a real thing to go for. They have something to look forward to besides, are we going to be 2 or maybe 3? We don't know, right? What difference does it make if you're not 1? I know a little bit of a difference, but like not really. It's just one of those things that I think it's going to be Charleston. I like what they're doing. Barajas, I believe, will be back for this one as well, which if there's any player that you don't want to see showing back up into the lineup, is probably Fidel Barajas. But let's go ahead, and I want to quickly move on down to sunny St. Pete, where we have number 2 Tampa taking on Birmingham Legion, where 22% of people think that Birmingham Legion have a chance, but that also means that an overwhelming, let's math, 78% apparently believe that Tampa Bay will be winning at home. Crazy thoughts that Al Lang is going to be a good place for Tampa to play. That said, of every single matchup in these playoffs from League One and the championship, this is the only matchup where a team has swept the season series, where Birmingham Legion were the ones that went 2-0 in the series, winning 2-0 and 1-0. So what do we think? Does Birmingham somehow pull the rabbit from the hat and continue sweeping the series this year? Or do we see kind of this Tampa Bay team that gets a 3-2 versus Lou City, where JJ Williams scores a goal in like 29 seconds, right? Like which one do you think we're going to be getting more of?
Well, I think Birmingham wishes they were a little bit taller. They wish they were a baller, and they wish they had a rabbit in the hat with a bat and a 6-foot Impala. I think Tampa Bay just likes to score goals, and Birmingham likes to give them up. Yeah, I mean, great job in the regular season, but it's hard to, after we've just talked about how the regular season is influencing the postseason, sometimes it's hard to bring that over. And I think, Tampa Bay playing fairly well down the stretch, maybe not the strongest team over the course of the season, but I think, that 2-3 Louisville win, maybe a little bit flattering toward Lou City in that one. I think there's we talked about the offensive weapons that Phoenix has. I think Tampa Bay has, a few of their own that could do some damage. And so I'm going with Tampa Bay. Sorry, Kaylor. I just think Tampa Bay at home in the playoffs is a different place to play unless you're, Orange County in a final.
I think what's been interesting with Tampa Bay this year is you take away their 2 losses their 2 wins they had against Louisville, kind of in near kind of back-to-back succession. The last team they beat that made the playoffs was New Mexico United all the way back in June. So a lot of the games that they've built up in this time have been against victories that they've gotten or against teams who didn't make the postseason. I know you can only play the teams that are in front of you on your schedule, and that's maybe just how things timed out. But I think that's something to at least consider and take a look at. And you're going up against a Birmingham team who swept the season series, as Kaylor had said. However, when you just kind of look at everything holistically, Birmingham has lost away from home 11 times this year. I think Tampa Bay has enough to get through this game, and they're playing at home is going to be a huge impact. They'll get the result here to move on, and then I think it's going to be a very interesting match next week against either Indy or Charleston.
For sure. The biggest difference in this match is honestly from the regular season is that Legion went with this 4-2-3-1 that they've always done, and now part of that 2-man midfield, Anderson Asiadu, while still contracted to the team, is no longer with the club, and he's just not there. And that was the main reason why Tampa Bay couldn't do anything. That was one of the main reasons, and now he's not there. And you don't have – your options now are Enzo Martinez, that one, as playing defensive mid with Matthew Corcoran, or putting one of them on an island by themselves against Cal Jennings and JJ Williams and, probably Leo Fernandez eventually. So it doesn't seem likely. In our official predictions, I said Birmingham just so I can feel something on the inside. But when I filled out the Google form, I said Tampa Bay because I know the truth. So that's where we are. Last match, and maybe the most intriguing one. I feel like I didn't miss anything. If I did miss a matchup, somebody yell at me either in the comments or something. But San Antonio versus Colorado Springs. This is not your, I would say your mama's San Antonio, but it was literally last year. So I guess it's not your San Antonio that you're used to. But also this is this Colorado Springs team that John Morrissey, the USL Tactics, has dubbed the most confusing team in the USL because they look like they can beat anyone, be the best team in the league, and then they turn into, well, frankly, the Colorado Springs we thought they were. You don't know what you're getting out of Colorado Springs, but Also, you kind of don't know what you're getting out of San Antonio either. They get their 5 matches out of their goalkeeper. Do they bring Jordan Farr back in now that they know they can have their emergency keeper on the bench? Do you play a guy who hasn't played in 5 games? Or do you stick with the guy that you've been running with? One has USL playoff experience, one does not. I think you also have to look at, Sacramento, yikes. San Antonio did this last year. They did it. I mean, this is still a team of Tanner, Maloney. They have these guys, these pairings that have gone there, been there, done that. And you can't help but think that these big-time playoff players show up. But also, this Colorado Springs team is looking good, and they are hot at the right time.
You're looking at a Colorado Springs team who has scored in their last 12 consecutive games. When you compare that, I think it's so funny with Colorado Springs is you look at their entire season, they've picked up results. I know that going into Colorado Springs is a tough place to play with the elevation, but they won against Sacramento and Pittsburgh at home this year. And that's really just undeniable form. But then you look at a team at their goal differential that they're only at +7. And when you look at their opponents who are, for whatever reason, at the end of the year, have forgotten how to win. They have one win in their last 10 games, which was a 4-0 victory over Orange County, which was kind of turned over when they lost 1-0 to Orange County a few weeks later. But this is still a San Antonio team who have a +25 goal differential on the year, and a San Antonio team that we recall won the league last season. They have some good results on their resume this season, but then they also have some really baffling results here as well. I think it's a really tough game to admittedly call.
Yeah, I think there's some differences between last year, San Antonio this year, right? 46% more goals allowed in this season than last season. Those 5 games that Ryan was talking about, +3 goal differential, but 9 goals allowed in that 5-game stretch, which is cause of concern for San Antonio, right? San Antonio can score goals in buckets, but recently they've been allowing goals in buckets for San Antonio, right? 9 goals, 5 games. That's a lot for San Antonio. If last year San Antonio would be like maybe 3-4 goals in those 5-game stretch. So there is some cause for concern for San Antonio in this one. I think the Indy 11 game was informative, right? They're going to give some up, but there's still a fight in them to get back. They 2-2 draw to Oakland, 3-3 draw to Tampa Bay. I do think Colorado has an opportunity to get out of this one with a win or draw. But San Antonio knows how to score, and so Colorado is going to have to bring that scoring prowess to the pitch. And I think if they score 1 or less, I think it's going to be a really hard evening for Colorado, but Colorado can score multiple goals. And San Antonio has been a little bit of a leaky faucet lately. So I do think, like I said, there's some cause for concern for San Antonio. I ended up going with San Antonio because I do think them playing at home, I think it might feel very similar to the previous game. They have 1 loss, but 9 draws. So, 1 win in the last 5 home games for San Antonio. So not exactly the feeling of content, but Colorado Springs 4 wins in the last 5 on the road. So Colorado can get something out of it for sure. And I think Colorado fans should be hopeful for this one. So I went with San Antonio for just the history. And I think that they can rediscover that form and solidify that defense. They're going to be just fine. But yeah, Colorado Springs can do it.
And when you're looking at a combination of Tejada, Enriquez, and Williams, like there's goals to be had here if you are Colorado Springs. And like you said, this is a team that can score. But like you also said, San Antonio can too, right? And I think my head, I took San Antonio, and in my head, I personally think that you're in this area of if you're not if you don't score 2 or more goals, heck, I'll say if you don't score more than 2 goals, if you're Colorado Springs, good luck, right? This just feels like one of those kind of games where it's not the same kind of back and forth shootout as San Diego Phoenix, despite me saying it's going to be a high scoring game. It's just one of those things that San Antonio feels like if you don't get 3 past them, you're not getting a result. And unfortunately, in the playoffs, a result, it goes to extra time. And they're probably going to get 1 more there too. That's just kind of the way they go. But I don't know. Colorado Springs could also just put the hurting on them and hold them to 1 goal. And they could walk out of Toyota Field with a 3-1 victory. And I don't think any of us are shocked. I think we'll say what happened to the mentality monsters, but I don't think any of us would be actually shocked by the result.
Yeah, I think this is the one first-round matchup that whoever wins this one, I don't think I would be surprised at the result. I think I'd be shocked at maybe the scoreline for this one. You're looking at a Colorado Springs team who, of their 16 wins this year, 13 of them have seen them score multiple goals in it. And what I think is really fascinating with San Antonio, and when you score multiple goals against them, the only match this year where San Antonio had their opponent score multiple goals and San Antonio won was a 5-2 victory over Hartford. Every other time that happened, and you're looking at a team that was incredibly competitive with San Antonio, and I think that's what we're going to see. This would not surprise me if it went all the way to 120 minutes and possibly PKs and beyond with this. I am going to really cautiously back San Antonio. If there was ever such thing as a reverse lock, it would be this one, because I really think it's very close to 50% on who's going to win, but San Antonio for me, just barely.
Well, 30% of people think that Colorado Springs is going to come out of the victory. So still 70% of people are thinking San Antonio. I do think, and this is where you have to take fan vote with a grain of salt, because I do think there's a little bit of voting for the name, right? That said, I mean, Colorado Springs they're just confusing. You don't know which one you're getting. Lately, it's been the good one, but they've just kind of just dropped these awful eggs. And San Antonio, while they've had moments of, you're like, Marcino, what are you doing, man? Like, I know you got your championship and you bought yourself a year, but also, why would you waste the talent that you have with playing around with it like this? I think there's also just a real world where, yeah, the mentality monster thing comes back. They're into playoffs and they run the table, and I don't think anybody's surprised whatsoever. If we see San Antonio's repeat this year, is anyone shocked? Probably not. You'd probably be more shocked that they went into Pittsburgh and Sacramento and won, but by the time they get to those games, you're like, I don't know, they're in it. They can do it. It's just one of those things that this is still a good team that just baffles us. So we are an hour and 18 into this. That is all of the matches broken down for you in a not so neat little pile. As we go on to the playoffs, the discussions, because we'll be having previews, we'll be doing a little bit of recapping. We might have to start possibly doing not 2 shows, because every Thursday, Soccer Down Here. We are going to be on Soccer Down Here. The USL show will be doing a little bit of recap, a little bit of preview. So check that out, Soccer Down Here, probably on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, the whole 9 yards. And, you can hear a little bit of us talking there. And, we'll probably have to condense these, maybe not full previews for every single match next week. But, hey, we'll talk about the big ones, because we're sure there's going to be bangers galore in this one. But that's a lot of USL talk for the night, unless anybody has some final USL thoughts for the night. I think it's about, yes.
Before the playoffs begin, shall we try and do one championship and dark horse pick for both leagues? Just so we can have on the record that we at least attempted to pick a champion before it gets easier to select one.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. To give you guys, I guess, just so I can think of it off the top of my head, I am going to go Okay, dark horse I feel like is a little bit easier, and I don't know if you can consider them a dark horse. They have home playoffs. I would say Charleston, but if we're saying someone who is not, they are below the home playoff line, it has to be a 5 and lower. I think I want to go with aforementioned Colorado Springs. I think they have a real chance to make a run for dark horse. As for the champion, I'm so boring. It's hard for me not to see Pitt. They're so good. What about you guys, Alan?
Just for the story, I would say San Diego. And
Okay.
dark horse, I'm going to say Colorado. I do think they have a decent shot because the West is so open. Like the West is wild. Any team could beat any team in the West up and down. We talked about how good New Mexico is and such. So I agree. Colorado is a really nice dark horse pick, and it would be kind of fun to see them do well.
I was even saying it in our group chat. I hate when picking chalk just makes sense. And this season, it seems like it's a really good Pittsburgh Riverhounds team that you're coming out of the Eastern Conference right now. So I will pick the Pittsburgh Riverhounds to win the USL Cup this season. But to go in a different direction for a dark horse pick, I think Indy 11 have a very decent chance at making the Eastern Conference final. And if they can get to the final of the East and drag Pittsburgh Riverhounds into a very tough game there, I think there is a route that you could see Indy 11 getting past Charleston, getting past the winner of Tampa Bay Birmingham, and making a decent run at the Cup. So I'll go with a very, impressive Indy 11 team for my dark horse.
You know, you kind of mentioned that this year that chalk really does seem to make the most sense. But I also feel like these are some of the most competitive matchups we've seen in a while. It doesn't feel like there's any matchup where you say, oh, they have no chance. I think we can realistically talk ourselves into every single matchup where the lower seeded team could be favored to win. But that said, it does feel like this one's chalk heavy. I think it's a bizarre season playoffs that we're looking at where the favorites should win, but there is a real world where all the least favorites go through. You know what I mean? Just weird. Weird.
And I guess we don't have to do a dark horse since there's only 6 options of teams down there. But we could at least do one champion pick for League One. So
I'm gonna go with Northern Colorado. I think they've been the team I've been riding with all season with some of my picks. I don't think they're maybe like the best team, but I think that if they can capture what they had early in the season, I think they can dominate. And so I'm going NoCo.
Union Omaha is as hot as you could possibly get. Northern Colorado has what it takes. But I think there's a team that gets lost in the mix, and that is North Carolina. And I really like this North Carolina team. They can score goals if they want to. They just have that. McLaughlin is incredible. Anderson has been great. Jaden Cervania has popped up with a clutch goal. Perez has been incredible. I always mess up his name. Mensigan has been great. I think that this North Carolina team has what it takes. They have the back line that can do it. They have the goals that can be scored. I think that chaos may kind of reign supreme. We get North Carolina.
14 unbeaten for Omaha to end the year, and that's 13 wins with 1 draw in that time. I know it started out rather awful for Omaha. I mean, if you're looking at their first 12 games, they were only on 2 wins at that time, and we were curious what Omaha had become for this season. But I do agree with Kaylor on this one that I think you're going to be finding a very tough North Carolina team in the postseason this year. And like I said earlier in the show, I think the winner of North Carolina, and assuming Northern Colorado wins against Madison this week. And I think the winner of that matchup is going to win the League One this season. But I'm going to back North Carolina FC to win promotion to USL Championship.
There's your storyline, people. Omaha scares me because of how hot they are. We always talk about getting hot before the playoffs, but it felt like they got hot too early. Like, yes, they are still lightning hot, unbeaten in 14, but also that has to crumble eventually. They have to lose eventually. And it doesn't make sense for them to lose anytime soon, but also it just feels like maybe the week off could be a bad thing for them. And we've talked about this with baseball, right? Where all these really good teams lose because they got that week off. When you're that lightning hot, you don't want to take a break. You want to keep beating teams. It scares me. I'm kind of actively afraid for Union Omaha right now, I'll be honest, just because of taking that week off.
Interestingly enough, last season, the two teams who had the bye both lost in that round. But when you go back to 2021, the two teams who had the bye both won in that round. And that also featured a number one seeded Union Omaha team who won 6-1 in that conference, in that semifinal against FC Tucson. So if we're bouncing back and forth of alternate years, it's looking good for a 1v2 USL 1 final.
Omaha versus North Carolina would be fun. NoCo versus North Carolina, they would all be fun. That League One is just fun. I could hype myself up into. I mean, if you told me it was Forward Madison versus North Carolina, I think I'm stoked. I think I'll find myself a way just to be just absolutely pumped. And anyway, that's a lot of USL talk. How about some just final thoughts for the evening? Ryan Allen.
Yeah, I guess I've just been running a lot more and planning to sign up for a 5K, and I'm now vocalizing this as a way to confirm my commitment to running a 5K in November. Since I haven't signed up yet, I've been procrastinating, but I do at least intend on doing that. So this is now at least vocalized proof that I have to do it now.
For everybody that's still listening to this point, at ILM_Ryan, spam his notifications and let him know, run the 5K. Everyone do it, please. Alan?
Yeah, I was just reminded this weekend about, how much fun the community is around, U.S. soccer and especially lower league soccer. And so don't wait for your team to start folding, to start really embracing the community around you. And don't be afraid to get involved more, be vocal, go hang out with each other. Don't feel like you always have the next week, because you might not. And so this past weekend was a really big reminder that this is a giant community of a lot of really lovely and welcoming and inclusive people. And I'm glad to be continue to be a part of it, even though I might not have a local team.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to kind of loosely just say we are coming to the end of our marching season. Only 3 more performances for us, and then I'm suddenly going to start getting a lot of weekends and a lot of just weekdays back, which is really exciting, but also a little bit sad because, that's been a lot of time just to see it just kind of go away. But yeah, that's been kind of what's happened in my life. Oh, my wife finished Gilmore Girls, and we both unanimously hate it. We hate the way it ends. It's dumb. We don't like that. If you haven't watched Gilmore Girls, it is kind of a fun start. And she, for the first time, is now watching Supernatural. So that is she's now being thrown into what it's like to be a 13-year-old girl for the first time, I suppose. I don't know. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. I hope a very happy playoffs for you all. And if your team is not in the playoffs, please still watch the matches because we really want ESPN to pick up the contract. Thanks. But for the last time tonight, here's Alan's voice.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist Podcast family. please go to protagnistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see everyone again next time.